Is buying a home sight unseen a very scary proposition? Would you be able to buy something big ticket like a house without stepping into it ever? Well, this buyer of mine did exactly that. This is a story about how my negotiation skills and knowledge of contracts helped make this even possible for them. And we had a win and a very successful transaction at the end of the day. So this buyer called me from the West Coast and said he wanted to buy a property in the Philly suburbs. The Northeast is home to many good colleges, and he wanted to be in the Chester County area to be within driving distance of two of his children who were going to school here. But the caveat was that was going to be a temporary arrangement. He would live there only for a few years, and then later he wanted to rent it out. So the first conversation was about buying the right kind of property, because when you want to live in it yourself, there are a lot of emotions involved and there's aesthetics involved. And when you want to rent it out, there's a lot of numbers and analysis involved, and cap rates and ROIs. We had to merge those two requirements and find something just right for the buyers. So the pro tip here, guys, is that in a strong seller's market, when you have to make an aggressive offer to win multiple bids, the only way you can get the buyers to make an aggressive offer is if they're very sure about the property that they're bidding on. So the key is to educate. So the buyer consultation that I do with my buyers at the beginning, when I first hear from them, is what is very, very crucial here in this part of the story. We discussed neighborhoods. We talked about commutes to the airport, to the train stations, the Amtrak stations. We talked about some neighborhoods not allowing rentals, some neighborhoods not being that ideal. Even though they were great ideal rental communities, it is not some place where they would want to live. So we discussed pros and cons of a lot of these communities and narrowed down on a few that would work for them. I drove by, I FaceTimed them from some homes. They visited once for a weekend, and we drove through some communities. We visited some new construction. So we've done a lot of our analysis and conversations over the Zoom calls and phone calls before. And then we were just waiting for the right property. And when it came, the buyers knew that this was the house for them, and we made a pretty aggressive offer to get it. Now, as usual, these are multiple bids, but we had made a good offer and the seller called us directly. So yes, this is the seller. This was a for sale by owner, or a FSBO as we call it in the business. And the seller chose to represent himself in this sale. And so my negotiations were directly with him. There's a little subtle nuances between two professionals negotiating contracts and me having to deal with the seller. But hey, my buyers wanted the property and I had to do whatever it takes, right? So the sellers in the whole process were unhappy with our terms and conditions. Even though we were the best offer that he had, and he told us that after all some of the back and forth, he was not happy with some of the terms and technicalities that we were requesting. And this is at 8:30 in the night, around 9 o'clock, and he's like, Bela, this is not acceptable to me. If your buyer doesn't want to let go of it, I'm going to go to the second offer that I have. That is, the next best one. So my clients didn't want to let go on principle. And so here I am in this situation where it's 9 o'clock. The seller wasn't willing to listen to me, and he'd already hung up. And what am I going to do? Well, I wrote him an email. We had already been communicating via email and phone throughout the last 2 days. And this was down to the wire because he was going to sign a contract that night. So there are 3 things I mentioned in there. One was I knew he was referring to the lawyers, and he was very upset and unnerved because the lawyer wasn't going to review this at this late in the night. No professionals are working besides realtors. You can take this to your lawyer tomorrow. We can do this tomorrow morning. We're okay to hold on to our offer until tomorrow. The second thing I told him was to Google my name. I said, there is a lot of online presence. I have social credibility. Just check my social media accounts, check my YouTube videos, my LinkedIn profile, my Zillow profile. It'll tell you way more about me than you need to know. That shows you that I'm a professional agent. I do know what I'm talking about. And the third thing I asked him to do was to refer to a specific, section of the contract and the paperwork and say, please check line this, page this of the contract, and see that what we're requesting is perfectly legit. It is not something that the buyers are just wanting for themselves, but it is something that is afforded to them by the contracts. Folks, that was the turning point in the transaction. He had already hung up on me saying that he didn't want to work with us. And in about 20 minutes, he called me right back. And the first thing he said to me was, my apologies. This was my mistake. I apologize. I didn't know this about the contracts. So, folks, it takes a lot of patience, a lot of credibility, and some tact and knowledge of contracts to make this happen. This was a very good move because it was mutual respect at this point. He respected what I had done, and I respected the fact that he acknowledged his mistake right away and was willing to move forward and respect me as a professional as well. So the rest, as they say, was history. It was pretty smooth. We had a remote notary settlement. There were some other issues that came up. There is always this high level of anxiety when the seller is representing himself because they don't do this all day long. When we're talking to realtors, we do this all day long, and it's, some of it is just normal process, which people who don't do this may not realize. But we got over those humps. We had established that credibility on day one, and it was a huge success for my buyers to be able to win this. And they're very happily moved in, and they're very excited to be proud new owners of the home. Hope this was something that you appreciated. I have a whole playlist of such client stories and what really made the difference in every transaction. Please click on the link in the description below and check out my entire playlist. Thanks for listening.